Dr. Dinesh Bhattrai, and Dr. Popular Gentle. And we have two speakers. I take the honor to introduce both speakers. Dr. Dinesh Bhattrai, sir, he is a faculty at the Institute of Crisis Management Studies and also teaches at the Department of Peace, Conflict and Development Studies at Tribhuvan University. Dr. Dinesh Bhattrai was Foreign Affairs Advisor to the Prime Minister of Nepal in different years. He was Nepal's ambassador to the United Nations, including the World Trade Organizations and international organizations in different countries. He obtained his PhD degree in international relations from the JNU and postgraduate diploma in international relations and development from the Institute of Social Studies at Hague. Dr. Bhattrai has long experience of working in foreign service in various capacities in various countries. He has co-authored and edited a book. He has published a number of articles in national and international newspapers and journals. Then we have another speaker, Dr. Popular Gentle. Popular is associated with the Institute for Land, Water and Society at Charles Sturt University, Australia. He is country director of IPAS Nepal. He is a seasoned leader with more than 20 years of experience in the development sector with a primary focus on poverty reduction, social justice, women's empowerment, and gender transformative programming. He previously served as Assistant Country Director for Care in Nepal, providing providing program oversight and strategic leadership on issues such as gender and inclusion. Dr. Gentle has a PhD in environmental science, which he studied from an economic and political perspective from Charles Sturt University in Australia, where he is an adjunct research fellow. His research has been extensively published on topics including poverty, gender and equity, and climate change adaptation. So today we have two speakers with 1 hour. So I request both speakers to take 20 minutes each, and I request the participants, if you have any questions, please write in the chat box, and all the questions will be taken at the end of the both presentations. So with this format, I welcome Dinesh Bhattrai sir. I see him now here. So I give this floor to Dr. Dinesh Bhattrai sir. Sir, over to you, please. You can share your screen. Unmute, sir, unmute. Yes, yes. Thank you.
Yes, okay. Can I? No, you can hear me, right?
Yes, sir, yes, sir. Clear, clear, loud and
Uh,
clear.
Madam Chair, Moderator, the organizing committee team, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, whoever are connected to this program. It is indeed a pleasure for me to be in the midst of these young scholars, distinguished participants, and other participants who are connected to the program in virtual mode. I thank Dr. Saroj Gewali for his invitation to me. I was encouraged because the young people are hosting this program. I thought that because the future belongs to the youth, the gathering of young scholars, the best and brightest mind in this seminar shows how serious is the issue of climate change and sustainable development, affecting all age groups. It also shows how there is a grave threat of climate change that is not going away. Uh, Climate change, in fact, remains a defining issue of our time. the topic I'm speaking on the topic that was given to me. It was climate change perspective, and where do we stand, Nepal? Climate change remains a defining issue of our time. It has become an existential issue and will therefore be crucial to living beings in the planet. It has significant impact on every aspect of daily lives of human beings. The greenhouse gas issue will persist through the entire century, this century and beyond. As we see, the climate change could alter economic, political, even military relations among nations. If we look at the tsunami of 2004 and hurricane, here and there, they have affected every aspect of human life. And it has affected agriculture and forest production. It has made us lose arable soil and tropical forest, condition of water supplies, and distribution of natural resources. They all are pushing people into poverty trap. New diseases like, as we read, Zika, Ebola, SARS, and all that, they seem to be emerging from climate change. Pandemic disease has been the biggest threat of all. Diseases caused by the climate threats can be prevented and treated if genuine steps are taken in time. The rising sea levels increased like ocean acidification, reducing fishing and aquaculture. World Bank estimates that by 2050, there could be 1 billion climate refugees from sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, and America. Reports, I was reading reports that quote Norwegian Refugee Council estimating about 26 million people being displaced by disasters such as floods and storms every year. That is one person every second. According to the UN Convention to Combat Desertification, some 135 million people could be displaced as a result of land and soil degradation by 2045. So, what we need is to invest in safe water, hygiene, and sanitation services. Some people become internally displaced in their own countries, and we have increasing number of climate refugees. That is a reality that we have to accept. Climate change is not just an environmental problem. As I indicated earlier, it is a humanitarian and health problem with multiple dimensions, as are manifested in the sea level rise, storm patterns, changing forest shifts, famine, and diseases, which could spread and lead to increases in migration from environmentally devastated countries, to developed countries like Europe and the United States. So we have been talking and talking. We can no longer afford to live in mere rhetoric. So to save the humanity, combating climate change has become a pressing issue. Climate change poses significant development challenges also. Concrete action is needed. Not only rhetoric, but actions are needed. We cannot slow down our actions and limit them to one country. Actions at the global level on clean energy, energy efficiency, afforestation, and biodiversity should be there. Fighting climate change has to be done in a holistic manner. If we look back, in the global summit held virtually last month, leaders focused on technology and innovation, on how to deploy technology and economic incentives to the emission reduction goals. While working towards the goal of emission reduction, it is necessary to respect national circumstances and sustainable development priorities. Climate change poses serious threat to human health. It worsens food and water shortages and increase of pandemics and aggravate mass displacement. As I said earlier, pollution causes poor air quality. Burning of fossil fuels and clearing of land has become a significant agent of climate change. This has considerably raised the temperature of the earth. According to the WHO, 90% of the world urban dwellers breathe air containing unsafe pollution levels. Air pollution causes an estimated 600,000 deaths each year. It causes a wide range of respiratory and circulatory disease. Mosquitoes, the deadliest animal in the world, causing more than 500,000 deaths each year. Warm temperature make it easier to transmit malaria. Another disease that we face is dengue, likely to spread and infect 96 million people each year and killing 90,000 each year. So, downplaying the climate change risk in any manner is the real danger that we face in our time. So, in 2015, leaders came together in Paris, as we know, IPCC, and reached a consensus on how to address the challenge of global warming. The Paris Agreement, we consider it as a turning point. Things, if we look back, things have gotten worse, not better since then, because we have lived in rhetoric, not in actions. It is time to put the world on a sustainable course and overcome the complexity of coordinating and accommodating all different players and interests that are involved. I feel the climate change issue will be no less serious than nuclear arms control. For the past half century that we saw, it took decades to develop a concept of arms control. It will take time to find to a consensus on climate change also, but this is a very serious problem that we can ignore at our own peril. Human beings and the international world are on a collision course, inflicting harsh and often irreversible damage on the environment and on critical resources. Lack of leadership is costing us the valuable time, failing to generate a sufficient sense of urgency around climate change. And I have to admit that climate change remains a low priority in foreign policy issue also, foreign policy discussion. Climate change comes at a time when we have a number of technologies such as wind power, geothermal power, energy, and certain types of solar energy. It is time now for an effective regime of transfer of affordable and appropriate technologies. There is a talk of climate equity. It is time for developed countries to announce support packages for poorer countries. Slowing global warming is a political problem. Developed countries will have to find a collaborative approach to the issue. We need a climate solution based on the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, equity, and respective capabilities. There should be a climate financing that should come in addition to the regular official development assistance, what we call ODA, for addressing mitigation and adaptation need of the least developed countries and small island developing countries, states. Let me briefly come to Nepal. I come to the state now, the state of climate change in Himalayan countries. Mountains are becoming hot spot of climate change. Nepal happens to be a highly vulnerable country and worst victim of climate change. The melting of the snow-capped mountains in Nepal has seriously affected the hydrological stability of river system and caused erratic and extreme weather events leading to flash floods, widespread extreme rain events, landslides, droughts, heat waves, loss of biodiversity, and decline in agriculture productivity and depletion of freshwater resources. We face depleting sources of groundwater supplies also. And we must not forget that they all have catastrophic impact on life, agriculture, and property. Whether it is the melting of Himalayan glaciers or rise of sea levels, climate change is real in all parts of the world. If the rising trend of global warming goes unchecked, it would adversely impact the lives of not just 250 million mountain dwellers, but also 1.6 billion people that live downstream. This threatens their livelihoods and makes the region fragile and unstable with widespread implication far beyond. Nepal has adopted, as we all know, a climate change policy containing national adaptation program of action with institutionalized structure like Climate Change Council, I think that is chaired by the Prime Minister. Nepal has created a climate basket fund to receive and allocate multiple financial resources for implementing suitable climate change adaptation and mitigation measures with equal emphasis on both. Climate change is pushing increasing number of countries and their people into poverty trap, as I mentioned earlier. Nepal calls for the increased attention on developing countries and least developed countries and landlocked countries like Nepal. But as the Global Climate Summit was held last month, Nepal was not invited to that. That is because I don't know how this government is working on such a serious issue. If we look back, look at the world scenario, very quick survey of the world shows us that Asia is seen as a battleground for water. Analysts call the region most disturbed in the world. Asia is home to 60% of the global population. I think even more than that, 61 or 62. Asia containing more than half of the world population living in the region looms larger in economy, in global security, in global prosperity and all that. It would be no exaggeration to say that the next battle could be over water. Water, thus, is a new battleground. Water is what oil was to the play of geopolitics in the 20th century. As we have seen, the rise and fall of powers in Asia is likely to be influenced by the management of the water resources. As I said earlier, and I repeat it, we can no longer live in rhetoric. Commitments need to be translated into actions. This is an interdependent and interconnected world. No single country, however powerful, can address this challenge. We have to work together in unity, solidarity, support, and collaboration. For sustainability, we have to galvanize the people at grassroots movement along with international actions. I say this because Asia will be at the center of new geopolitics. Global power is shifting from the west to the east based on the increasing power, influence of China and India. This makes Asia even more important for its strength, strategic location, and also glaring for its flaws. We have huge diversity. Maintaining unity in such a huge diversity is another challenge. If we cannot do it, it is likely that Asia's troubles could quickly become everyone's else. If we have a quick look at the state of affairs in Asia, where we live, where our home is, distrust and dislikes are increasing among nations. We don't have to go far for that. Look at India, China, and United States, China, and all that. I will not go into detail. This is likely to make Asia an engine of conflict and instability. At a time when the COVID-19 is devastating Asia, and it has devastated our economic, social, and cultural life. It is not only doing that, it is intensifying geopolitical rivalries as we see manifested in the standoff along the Himalayan frontiers. India, China, as I said, even between big countries and the small countries. Tibet, Himalayan frontier, Himalayan region is going to be important because the Himalayas are the fountainhead of water. They could be the flashpoint of new geopolitics. The Himalayan waters, they flow into the Bay of Bengal and they originate from the Himalayas, from the mountains. And we cannot isolate Tibet in this respect. I think we live in a precarious time and we are living indoors. COVID-19 has confined us to our homes, and thanks to technology, we are meeting in a virtual mode. But this is a very challenging time, and we have to recognize that with challenges come opportunities. How we work, how we come together to overwhelm challenges and bring opportunities is up to the leadership. The task of leaders is to lead, is not to give high sounding slogans. We can no longer, I repeat, in rhetoric, in slogans. We need actions and we want delivery. We need results. So I think I have spoken enough. With this, I again would like to thank the organizers, particularly Dr. Saroz Gewali, for approaching me to speak on this. Thank you very much for the kind attention, and the host for having me in this seminar. This is a difficult time, as I said. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you very much. And I wish you all the best, all the success of this program. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you, Dr. Dinesh sir. It was really very nice to know your experiences about this climate change and global warming. You are highly involved in a lot of different foreign policies, national policies work in this climate change. So it was very nice to have you here with us. And you have rightly said that this climate change, this issue, it should be taken as holistic form, not only one particular thing. And this one of the reason maybe the climate changes, maybe because of the human caused reasons. And another thing that you said, it was really afraid that this climate refugees, you were talking about climate refugees, and then one day it is not only oil war or cyber war, sometime in the future it can be water war among the developing countries and developed countries. Yeah, so I think this is a very big problem. It's going to be a big problem to the world, and it has to be taken. collectively. Thank you, sir. Thank you for sharing your experiences about this topic. Thank you very much. We will take the questions from the floor at the end of another session also. So thank you very much, sir. Now I invite Dr. Popular Center for your presentation, please. And please share your screen. Thank you, sir.
Yeah,
Thank you
thank
very much,
you.
sir. And
Thank you
I
very much.
will remain at the end of the session also. Yes, Popular Center, sir.
Thank you. Good morning and namaste, everyone. Dear chair, moderator, and participants, thank you very much for providing me this opportunity to be a part of this important conference. Many of PSU students know me as I was part of the PSU research program this year. What a great combination of the presenters, starting from a very high perspective on climate change presented by Dr. Bhattarai. I would focus on a very narrow topic on climate change adaptation from local institutions' perspective. And my presentation is based on my ongoing research. And this is also part of my research that I am doing together with some of the PSU students. So as I said before, the topic of my presentation is role of local institutions on climate change adaptation in Nepal. Let me start with the context. About 18.7% of people out of 28 million still live below absolute poverty in Nepal. And agriculture is a major source of livelihoods where 60% population depend. And over 60% farming still reliant on monsoonal rainfall. And rural and natural resource dependent communities are most vulnerable in the face of climate change. The changing temperature and rainfall patterns are the major threats due to climate change, which are resulting in glacial melting, floods, landslides, and droughts in Nepal. 1.9 million people are highly vulnerable due to climate change in Nepal. And another 10 million people are at risk. 17.1 per thousand population affected by disaster in Nepal. And very interestingly, the warming has been higher in the mountains than the global average over the last 100 years. And within Nepal, in comparison to lowlands, Tarai, the mountains are, the warming in the mountains is higher. Let me move to climate change adaptation. As we know, the climate change adaptation is adjustment in natural or human systems in response to actual or expected climate stimuli or their effects, which moderates harm or exploits beneficial opportunities. The climate change adaptation practices occur at different scales, that is starting from local, regional, and national levels. It occurs at different sectors. For example, water resources, agriculture, tourism, and public health. And the practices occur at different type of actions. The actions could be physical, technological, investment, regulatory, social, and market. And the practices also occurs based on type of actors. The actors could be government, private sector, communities, and individuals. And it occurs at different climatic zones and level of countries. Let me move to some types of adaptation. The adaptation could be anticipatory or reactive based on timing of responses. And it could be short-term or longer-term based on temporal scale. And it could be technological, financial, institutional, and informational based on form of adaptation. And it could be autonomous or spontaneous or deliberate or reactive based on planning of responses. And based on scope and limitations of adaptation, it could be incremental or transformational. The research on institutions and especially on local institutions started from 1970s. There are some definitions about the institutions. I am not going to read their definitions, but most importantly, the research carried out on commons, the theories of commons led by Ostrom and researchers highlighted that collective management of environmental goods and services as common pool resources requires institutions in the form of rules, structures, norms, and values. So based on this, the role of local institutions is very relevant and important in climate change adaptation. There are 3 areas that I can share about the role of local institutions in climate change adaptation. The first role, what I can present is local institutions can structure the distribution of climate risk impacts by reducing the ill effects and distribution of risk. Second area is institutions constitute and organize the incentive structures for households and community level adaptations. And institutions mediate external interventions into local context, which ultimately unfold the adaptation by articulating social and political processes. So these are the 3 important dimensions where we can justify the role of local institutions in climate change adaptation. The areas where local institutions can contribute in climate change adaptation can be grouped into different thematic areas. The first one, what I can highlight is spatial adaptation. Spatial adaptation is adaptation over space, such as internal and external migration and transhumant pastoralism. Second area is temporal adaptation. Temporal adaptation is adaptation over time. For example, storage of food and water resources. Another area is diversification. Diversification is very important in climate change adaptation. That includes diversification of livelihood options, diversification of income, diversification of agricultural practices. And another area is risk transfer. Local institutions can support communities, households, and individuals through risk transfer, such as accessing to finances and insurance. And another area what I highlighted is the blending of tradition and science. Local institutions, they have limited scope. If we can blend the traditional knowledge, technology, and practices with scientific knowledge, it could be a better option for a climate change adaptation. And the last point, not least, the common pooling of resources through collective actions. The common pooling of resources can transfer the risk, and it supports local communities to organize and act collective actions for climate change adaptation. And I have some challenges and a way forward in relation to the role of local institutions and climate change adaptation. The first one is local institutions have very limited capacity and scope, where the challenge is to mainstream climate change adaptation into the planning process of government at different levels. local institutions can influence and can engage in this process, but with limited capacity and scope. The second challenge I can see is the limited scope for local institutions to influence the blended approach to link local knowledge and practices. And the research that we are doing in Nepal and other countries have very much highlighted that elite domination in local institutions. Most of the decision making in the local institutions are done by their traditional power holders. So they have a big challenge reaching to poor, socially excluded, and the most vulnerable. And another challenge, what I can highlight, is the weak internal governance within the local institutions in terms of transparency, participation, and accountability, and ability to transform organizational policies, structure and practices, and delegate authority and power by local elites is a big challenge in the local institutions for the pro-poor adaptation in Nepal. So based on these analyses and based on my ongoing research, I would like to present a framework. The framework presents climate change and variability, which is ongoing. And we should not ignore the climate change is happening in the context where we are surviving with poverty, inequity, and unsustainable livelihoods. So what I can say is vulnerability is the combined effect of climate change and variability together with ongoing poverty, inequity, and unsustainable livelihoods. So how local institutions can influence, can address the vulnerability, which is the interaction between climate change and some social and poverty issues. The local institutions can mobilize local resources, they design incentives, they can facilitate external interventions. With this interaction, the outcome could be local initiative for climate change adaptation. So this is the framework that I am using in this presentation and in my ongoing research. It shows the different perspective on understanding the vulnerability. It's not a technical or climate issue. It's not only the social issue, but this is the combination. And local institutions, by their understanding on local knowledge, with their capacity to mobilize the local resources, they can influence, they can address the vulnerability, and they can bring local initiative for climate change adaptation. So this is my short presentation, and I am very happy to answer any questions or queries from the participants. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Popular Gentle Dr. Sir. It was really very interesting presentation talking about the local governance and the utilization of local resources. Sir, can you take your share screen? So let me see if we have well, Dr. Dinesh sir is still there, I think.
For your kind information, Dr. Dinesh Bhattacharya has left from the meeting for his personal reason.
Okay, he has already left. Okay.
Yes.
Then okay, so Popular General, so it was very nice for your presentation. In your study that I think you said that you are doing this with your PhD students also. So when you talk about the resource mobilization in the local places, what do you think? Who should start making this to cope up with this climate change? In local space, who should start this? The public or the local governance? Means in federal Nepal government, we have so many layers of the government, and there are so many NGOs, INGOs working with this. So who do you think should start? This is one my question. Then we will go to the chat box.
Thank you very much. This is very interesting to discuss who should start these. I think the people who are affected by climate change, they should start bringing their voice, and they should bring how they are impacting from climate change, how their livelihood is impacted. That is one area. But definitely the government should formulate some regulatory framework, policies, and institutional arrangement. That is the responsibility of the government to regulate, to facilitate, and to ensure climate change, especially the climate change adaptation through policy process. And the role of civil society and local institutions comes in between the affected community and the government to facilitate this process, to advocate this. So I see the role of different actors, a range of actors should involve in climate change adaptation. In case of Nepal, we have a very good example of managing resources by local communities. For example, the large number of people are managing local forest resources as community forestry. And people are engaged in managing water resources through irrigation water users groups, drinking water resource groups. So community-based practices are very well known, and we have very good examples of managing commons through collective actions. If we can better link those experiences in climate change adaptation by bringing the local knowledge and the resources in the adaptation, I think it will be a very complementary role. And the most important challenge on who should start and who should lead is how can we mainstream climate change? It's not, if we think climate change adaptation in isolation, we cannot find a solution. How to mainstream climate change into planning process, and how can we define the role of different actors on it? So I think a more coordinated and holistic approach, recognizing the role of different actors. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. There are some questions in the chat box. If you can see, you can take one question, and then I think we want to take one photograph of each screen. So I request all of you to come. You put on your video. Put on your video. They take the photo, and then we will take one more question. Okay, doctor? Is it okay?
Yes, I am just reading some questions on my chat box.
All the participants, please put on your video so that we can take the screenshots. Raju sir, who is taking this photo? Govind sir?
Vijay sir will take the photo. Vijay sir.
Vijay sir, okay. Saroj Gewali sir, you are not in the video.
Waiting.
Yes sir, photo लिँदै जाउँ हामी क्वेशनको आन्सर गर्दै जान्छौँ. Dr. Saab, you have seen the question in the chat box. Yeah, we can.
Thank you. So the first question to me is, how do you judge the initiatives of Nepal to tackle future climate risk? You have run down through the various issues impacting climate change and climate change. Okay. One question I have is where we stand in complying with climate change adaptation policy and practices. The government formulated the first climate change policy in 2011. Before that, National Adaptation Plan of Action (NAPA) was prepared in 2009, which highlighted the role of local institutions in climate change adaptation. And government also developed local adaptation planning guidelines, which we call LAPA guidelines. And right now, the government is now working on climate vulnerability analysis to develop its next level of climate change adaptation plan at the national level. So these are the initiatives that government is taking at the national level. So, and government also decided to mainstream climate change into the planning process, which is the notion of our climate change policy. That I can say where we are in terms of our adaptation policy and practices. Another question, Navraj Pokhrelji asked me, individual actors also play an important role to adapt climate change impacts. Yes. The impacts of climate change are at individual level, at household level, at community level, and at higher level. So the individual level impacts are, for example, the impacts on health, impacts on income and livelihoods. So the capacity of individual, how individuals are informed, how they are equipped with information, knowledge, technology, and finance, that matters a lot in defining climate change adaptation at the individual level. And it becomes a household level adaptation issue, and it becomes a community level. So scale of adaptation starts from individual, that I can say. And if you need further discussion, then I am happy. Susila Rizal, she asked me, can we blend autonomous adaptation practices in the centralized strategical framework? Yes, definitely. If we ignore local knowledge, local practices that the people are practicing to respond, to react to climate change, then we cannot make a successful plan at any level. So ultimately, the unit of adaptation should be the most vulnerable people and their livelihoods. So how people are reacting, how people are responding, how people are adapting to climate change adaptation is very important to consider. It's very important to recognize for any planners and the policymakers. So what I recommended is the blended approach. The local knowledge and local practices are not enough. And the external technology, external knowledge, and the external practices cannot also solve the problem unless we blend it with local knowledge, practices, and technology. So considering the context of Nepal, context of the rural households, I still advocate, I still propose a blended approach. Thank you.
I think there are no questions. I have one small question, Dr. Poplar.
Yes, please.
Yesterday, we just have the budget speech yesterday. Has government addressed anything about this climate change, global warming, or anything to work at local sector and anything? Have you noticed anything addressed towards this issue? I didn't get a chance to go through that.
I have not gone through the detail, but what I heard is the government has increased budget on climate change adaptation linking with local planning. That is one area. Another is government decided to facilitate these electric vehicles. So by lifting the taxes, it was also announced before, but they stopped it. They only consider the tax, I think. But now there are some changes on tax regulations for the electric vehicles, which will help us to show our commitment and to help us in reducing emission and to promote some clean energy. So these are some areas that I have seen, but we have to see in detail. I think the allocating budget or policy commitment is not enough, but how they approach to mainstream local planning process, considering the climate change adaptation, and how they develop strategies to reach to the most vulnerable people is very important. So still we wait the approaches and strategies of the government, how they prioritize the climate change adaptation.
Thank you, sir. All the participants, the questions that you have posted to Dr. Dinesh, sir, we will send them to him. So if he is ready, he will give the answers to you. So if you have any questions, we can take one more question because we have some time. One more question. If you have any question, raise your hand. Otherwise, we will close this session. Okay, I don't see any hand raising here. So thank you very much, all the participants, and especially the speaker, Dr. Popular Gentle. It was very nice to have you here and share your experiences. Thank you very much. And thank you all the participants. Now I announce this session to be closed today. Now we can enter to other plenary sessions.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks
again for inviting me, and thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.